how to overcome the fear that is causing your procrastination or your confusion. Okay, so let me just ask this. Do you ever procrastinate? Do you ever delay making a decision that you know needs to be made? Do you ever become aware that there's something you want to do with your life or some action you want to take but there's some fear that's stopping you? So today I just want to talk about how to actually overcome the fear in our life. Now, let me just put a caveat here. This is not a one time and done little situation. I'm not going to slap you on the forehead and then you're going to be done with fear for forever. This is something that I have been working on a lifetime with. And this is also something that is very helpful to work with somebody else with to speed up that progress. But I realized when I was very, very young that I was very, very fear oriented. Um, I just remember being afraid of things that my little brother was not afraid of. In fact, my brother Michael and we were having a conversation about a month ago. And he says, yeah, I remember one time we were riding the car. I mean, listen, this was the time that he was referencing. It had to be when I was about 5 and he would have been 4, maybe 4 and 3, young, probably 5 and 4. And I believe what had happened, my details are fuzzy. The fear, I remember that part. But I believe what happened is my mom had sent a trusted friend to come pick us up to bring us to her. We knew this woman well. Her name was Sandy, dear friend of the family. And she picked us up and I said, where are we going? And she goes, I'm stealing you. And I froze. I am like, oh my goodness, what am I going? And my mind immediately believed her and started coming up with what actions need to be taken. While I also was aware that maybe she was just teasing me and I don't necessarily need to panic. But my brother says, I remember you froze. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm like, well, if she is, what are we going to do now? How am I going to take care of Michael? What am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this car? Where are we going to go? What's life going to be like? Fear. Man, it'll take us on a trip. So here's what happens with our fear. Now, I believe my mom actually taught me this. You're not going to overcome fear by hiding from it. Your life is going to get really, really small. I remember when, say around 14, 15, 16, those insecure years, I remember asking her to do things for me. Hey, mom, can you return this to the customer service desk at Walmart? And she's like, no, you need to do it. And I'm like, oh man, I have to talk to people. And can you do this? No, you need to do it. I remember my dad when I was 14 or 15 telling me to call up a list of insurance agents and get quotes. And I remember thinking, that's scary. But, not obeying him would have been scarier. It didn't even cross my mind. Here's the deal. The more we actually confront our fear, and I'm going to talk about how we want to confront our fear because we do not want to do it in a harsh manner. But the more that we allow ourselves to confront our fear, then the more familiar we become, and then the more capable we become. So I am so thankful that my mom and dad didn't just automatically say, if I said I'm afraid or whatever, they wouldn't automatically say, oh, okay, and give in, let me do this for you. They just said, this is something you need to do. They didn't make a big deal about it or whatever. I'm not sure that I ever told them I was afraid. I'm probably pretty sure that I didn't ever share that I might have been afraid because that's embarrassing. That's shameful to share your fear. That's something that needs to work through too. But so many times when I'm talking to my clients, they are incredibly motivated um, people who are already doing amazing things. And yet there's an area that they want, a direction in life they want to go in, and they're afraid. Here's a big, big one: social media. So I have many, many friends that are coaches, and I have some clients that are coaches, and they're aware that they could potentially get more clients, more people to be able to help with their mission if they would post more regularly on social media. And yet, this huge fear about social media comes up, and I don't blame you one bit. I've been there. I've walked through this exact process that I'm going to share with you to get better on it. And you're right. There are so many more people you can help on the other side of facing your fears about social media. So, number one, I just want to recognize that procrastination sometimes is a form of fear playing out into an action. I get really, really frustrated when people say, I must be lazy because I'm procrastinating. No, sometimes you're procrastinating because there's a fear that is preventing you from just taking the action confidently. Um, you're not making a decision, not because you're confused, because there's a fear that is keeping you from seeing the situation clearly, seeing all of your options. So let's just approach those problems like this. If you catch yourself procrastinating, if you catch yourself confused, if you catch yourself stuck, what if there is a fear that's got you stuck where you're at? Then let's look at that fear so that we can overcome it, so we can get on the other side of it. All right. So here's the mistakes that we made when we are trying to conquer our fear. So one of the mistakes we make is that we try to avoid it with procrastination. I already said that. But a second mistake that we make, and if this is a big one, this is an exhausting one. This is one you'll know by the level of exhaustion that you experience. We try to deny the fear is even there by just pushing through it harshly. So, for example, say you're a coach that's struggling with posting on social media, then you're like, well, I shouldn't. You'll hear the word should on this. I shouldn't be afraid. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just make myself do it. So it's that kind of like there's a little bit of shame that you have the fear. And so to get over the shame, you just push through. It will work a little bit, but you will be exhausted and you will push yourself to burnout really, really fast. This is the path to burnout. So pushing yourself by denying the fear and just pushing through anyway, if you don't actually get to the root of the fear, then you're going to burn out. All right. Here's the third thing we try to do. And oh, this is one that I tried for a long time. I try to out-logic the fear. We try to out-logic our fear. We try to say, well, there's rational fears versus irrational fears. There are, some things that you should be afraid of. For example, death. And then there's some things that you shouldn't be afraid of. And of course, that we shouldn't be afraid of, that changes from person to person, individual to individual. For example, look at when COVID came. Some people were saying, you should be afraid of COVID. It'll kill you. Some people were saying, actually, that's an irrational fear because so few of the people infected die from it. This is a terrible way to deal with fear, by trying to out-logic, by using rational versus irrational fears. By the way, if you are a coach who's working with clients, let me share something with my experience that might help you. Do not try to convince your client that there is nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. It just entrenches them in it. Okay. So I had a client and we were working on a few different things. But one of the things, she was coming up on an anniversary, and her husband were wanting to go to Hawaii, and they lived in mainland United States. You do not get to Hawaii unless you do one thing, get on a plane. And she wanted to go to Hawaii with her husband. She did not want to get on the plane. And she says, what if something happens? What if we die? What if somebody dies? What if we die? And I almost went there and I said, well, what are the chances of that, do you think? But I didn't this time. And I'm telling you, this had to be the Holy Spirit that kept me from going here, because before I would have always gone here. But I think the Holy Spirit was trying to show me a lesson. And instead of saying, what are the chances of that? As in, I'm trying to break it down rationally to show her that her fear is irrational, illogic. Flying is so safe. The odds of that happening are so little, all this thing. I didn't. Instead of that, I asked, but what if it happens? And I'm going to go into this a little bit deeper. And I walked her through this process that I'm going to share with you in a second. I said, okay, instead of saying it probably won't, but what if? What if this happens? And when I did that, we were able to create a plan of action for her to confront her fear with 3 things: curiosity, courage, and compassion. Curiosity, courage, and compassion. So when I did this, when I walked her through this, she came up with well, what is this about? And she, curiosity, she dug into it a little bit. And then what's the courage choice? And she labeled that. And then the compassion, as in, it's your decision. What are you going to decide? And you're going to give yourself compassion either way. You're going to face it with courage, or you're going to stay here. Either way, but we're not going to do this harshly, forcing ourselves. And so when I just, with compassion, no judgment, because whether I'm given the judgment or whether she's given herself the judgment, it's still judgment that is clouding the issue. So I can give her all the compassion in the world. If she doesn't give herself compassion, if she judges herself, then she would still be stuck in the confusion of what is it you really, really want. So one of the ways you drop that judgment is by going to compassion. So I said, but what if? And she created, so we got curious, we got compassion, she developed courage, she decided this is something I want to do, and here's how I will look at it. And so she created a plan of action. I kid you not, y'all, on that trip, on the flight, somebody did pass away. Somebody that was sitting near them. And she had this moment where she realized my greatest fear, or one of my great fears, has happened, and I can help. I have something to offer the widow of the person that passed away. So much growth, but that wouldn't have happened if we had tried to out ration, logic away her fear. There had been no growth. She'd been like, yeah, it's stupid of me to fear this. That's another form of self-judging. All right. So how to move past fear. One of the things that, in fact, I would say probably the first step. So the Bible says this. Let me go back. The Bible says perfect love casts out fear. So we don't force fear away. We don't deny fears there. We don't push through fear. We use perfect love to cast out fear. But how in the world do we use perfect love to cast out fear? I've kind of broken it down to some steps. So if you're a person that likes to take notes, these are the steps that you're going to want to write down. Number one, identify the purpose that is bigger than your fear. So for my client, the purpose was, I want to be the person who can go places with my husband that require a plane trip. I want to deepen our relationship. Yes, that is more important to me than staying in my comfort zone and never confronting this fear. So identify a purpose that's bigger than your fear. So, but how do you find the fear in the first place? Well, when you catch yourself procrastinating, not taking action, being confused, all those things, you ask yourself, what is it I'm afraid of? So I kind of got these steps backwards, but the first question should be, what is it I'm afraid of? You know, when I catch myself in a procrastination moment or a confusion moment, number one, what is it that I am afraid of? Number two, what is that purpose that's even bigger than that fear? Is there any reason? Is there anything on the other side of this fear that is bigger than the fear itself? Can I identify it? And then three, I want you to go there. I want you to ask, but what if? So there is a story in the Old Testament about three Hebrew kids called Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. I think they were probably young men at this point. And they were told they were captives, taken captives by the evil king Nebuchadnezzar, who got talked into this terrible idea of creating an idol of himself and forcing everybody on point of death to bow down and worship the idol or die. And I'm telling you guys, talk about politics. Politics is not a new thing. Politics is an old thing. The whole reason, if you look into the story, it's fascinating because the whole reason this incident came about is because there were some people in the king's court that were trying to get rid of these influential people in the king's court that were just, you know, captives, Hebrew slaves. And so one group's trying to get rid of the other group, and they're like, ha, I know what we can do. We can attack them on their beliefs. And so, come up with this idea. And so he's like, oh, it's a great idea. Yes, I should be the supreme person in this, and everybody should be, and this should be a loyalty test. So they created this loyalty test. And there's these three young men that are faced with this loyalty test. On pain of death, who you're going to be loyal to, God or Nebuchadnezzar. And they literally had their moment. And I just love that God puts the story. I love that God created this story, as in that God orchestrated events so that this would happen. And then it got written down so that we can use it for our current benefit. Nebuchadnezzar says, kind of like, what are you going to do? And their answer was this: we are not careful to answer you according to this in this manner, O king. O king, respectfully, there's no struggle here. I know the answer. And the answer is this: our God is bigger than you. Our God is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace that you have condemned us to. And he will deliver us. But if not, we're not afraid to die. But if not. So the first step to using perfect love to cast out fear is to ask yourself, what is it I'm afraid of? In those moments when you're procrastinating or you're not making a decision or you feel stuck. The second is to identify the purpose that is bigger than your fear. It's recognizing, this is so amazing. It's recognizing that the fear is here for a purpose. The fear is not the enemy. The fear is a tool I can use for a purpose, identifying that purpose that is bigger than your fear. And then 3, do the what if, but if not, as in state the positive potential. My God's able to deliver me, and he will deliver me. State it positively, the potential. It's there. This can happen. This can be totally fear eradicated. Fear is not necessary because it's not going to happen. And state what you're going to do if the negative possibility, the negative potential occurs. But if not, we still won't bow. Even if it caused our death, we still won't bow. So question number 1, what am I afraid of? Question number 2, find the purpose that's bigger than your fear. And then 3, state the what if and the but if not. State the positive, hey, this could potentially happen. And state the negative. And if this thing that I'm afraid of happens, here's how I'm going to handle it. Here's what I have decided to do. That is why you have to use curiosity, courage, and compassion to get here. So perfect love can cast out fear any day, anytime, if you just walk through these 3 steps. I hope that this has helped you. Oh, I wanted to share with you also, right before I got on to record this, to do this live on Facebook, I was listening to my song list, and I love music. I love the stories that music will say. And there's this song called Orpheus by Sarah Bareilles. Don't know how to say her last name. It's Bareilles. Orpheus, Orpheus. And if you're really wondering, what does perfect love cast out fear? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by using curiosity, compassion to develop your courage? Listen to that song. I think that song explains how to use curiosity and compassion at the same time, as in compassion for who you are right now, to move forward into this courageous state where perfect love casts out fear. Because the perfect love is this. It's love that is undivided. Because on this side of the fear, we're conflicted. There's what we want and there's what we don't want. But on the other side, when we look to our higher purpose, it becomes complete. This is what I want more than this divided self that's on this side. And so therefore, for this reason, I am going to courageously navigate, maybe not confront in a harsh way, but navigate this fear because my purpose is bigger than my fear. My purpose is bigger than my fear. Or here's another way of saying it. My fear of not accomplishing my purpose is greater than my fear of going forward. I like to play with words, see which one resonates, what works best for me. I hope this has helped. If you have any questions or if you feel stuck, then make sure you reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook at April Bragg. You can find me on Instagram at April Bragg About Life. YouTube, Hiram and I are both on there at Bragg Coaching. And if you need some help confronting some fears, make sure you send me a message on Facebook or Instagram and we'll talk about it. Okay. Overcoming fear. The but what if not test. Perfect love casts out fear. This has been fun. I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.